Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. And today we have a super interesting conversation because we're going to talk about the latest trends that have been happening over the last decade in the network infrastructure industry. Where has that taken us? Where are we today? What are the opportunities that we can capitalize on right now? And we have on with us Shawn Tinsley. Now, Shawn, you're the Senior Director of IT at a Fortune 500 company. And this is the world that you live and breathe in. And Dave, you are the Chief Product Officer at one of the leading technologies out in the marketplace for the Bigleaf networks. What I'd love to do before we get started, we're going to be talking about where networks drive business and how that happens and where are we today in our role and how we can play. What can we put into our networks today to take care of the resiliency, to take care of everything downtime, things that we need to drive business in a distributed environment with the Internet of Things, everything that we need to be doing. And we're going to be looking at wireless in a big way today. So before we start, Shawn, I would love to have you maybe just give us a little bit more of your background, and then Dave, and we'll dig in.
Sure, yeah. So I'm a former enterprise architect. I started moving into defining architectures for Fortune 50 companies. And so part of that, of course, is on the network side. And as we look at this kind of as a trend, let's say over the last 10 years, we're looking at a market that's just exploded. So we're talking, 7% growth year over year. We're talking 200 billion in terms of actual revenues across this market. And so part of my thing was really looking at not just local area networks for business, but also exploring metropolitan lands, wide area networks, that kind of thing. And so major market trends or things that I've really seen over the last 10 years or so, it was that obviously the total transition to the cloud. Gartner predicted by right about now, actually, that we would have more compute power sold as infrastructure as a service than we did in the last 30 years. And we've really come to that point. And from terms of both technologies and assistive technologies, I think 5G deployment is really big. We've seen the rise, and that is a major trend transforming global network infrastructures. A lot of the time, at least from my kind of piece of the pie, I focus a lot on the US, but I've also seen that expand beyond to Europe and to Asia. And I think that's also really a large piece that's going to grow year over year. Next 10 years, we're going to see this massive development there. Also, the other part that I've really been looking at is edge computing and Internet of Things and Industry 4.0. So I've seen this massive growth, not just in networks, but also in sensor data and software-defined networking, how we get around the challenges of the next century. And we're setting that groundwork today. I think foundationally, we're also looking at AI integration. Maybe not now. I would equate AI integration now to more of the Pentium phase. We're not into the high-end computing part of that yet, but we're going there. And so directionally, we also need to wrap our arms around that. So I think if we look at that and Europe's network market poised to grow so much, obviously, there's been some market fluctuations in the last couple of years, but also I think on the Asia side, we're seeing really a lot of growth there. So from a future outlook then, or to tee up that conversation, automation, observability, and in terms of telemetry of devices and the Internet of Things, bringing in that AI perspective, and then really the network convergence. How do we bring network platforms, AI operations, and foundationally security into this equation, and how do we tee that up to make a sort of a robust, secure platform that we can take forward for the next 10 years? I think that's really where we are at this point.
There's a lot more to explore there. Thank you, by the way. Very impressive background. Dave, if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit on your background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Steve. I appreciate it very much. So I spent the last 20 years focusing really on small and medium-sized businesses and their needs. So I started off really in the telco space and Nextel, really in the wireless space, so Nextel and Sprint. And I moved into more of the software space for about 10 years after that, focusing on software solutions for small and mid-sized businesses. And I came back to Verizon because I felt like Verizon had a really large platform in which you could bring these two things or converge these two things together and create something that's really different and unique in the market. And so I've spent some time at Verizon really helping get the fixed wireless access solutions off the ground and really to the market from a commercialization and productization perspective. And that was a convergence of new digital platforms, ways in which that we could consume new products and services, as well as the ubiquity or leveraging ubiquity associated with the investments made around 4G and the upcoming investment with 5G technology. Really, it's making broadband really more accessible to more and more people, and also bringing in that software element that allows customers to leverage sort of these more basic technologies like 4G and sort of the emergence of 5G in creating a hardened network environment that could mirror something like a broadband or wireline connection. And so that's what led me to Bigleaf Networks over the past couple of years. So really what we've been focusing on is taking that technology and really bringing it forward in a way in which customers can now rely on 4G and 5G technology as something they can implement into their network and leverage as a primary or even a secondary backup solution inside their network. So what I've started to see more and more from a trend perspective here in North America is leveraging 4G as that secondary connection for broadband and fiber connections and things of that nature for smaller businesses. Folks that don't have access to direct Ethernet or things like that and designed and directly integrated into their office location, they have to use commercially available solutions. And commercially available solutions are run into issues like, hey, there's construction going on outside of my office location. They just cut my fiber line. They just cut my cable. Or unreliability of service because of older infrastructure. It's just not quite as reliable, and really needing that wireless as a very easy, simple, and cost-effective to get a wireless service in its backup. So that's really kind of where the business or where that industry started, where the foundation was around 4G connectivity. And then as we move more into 5G, it's much easier to come in and displace those wireline services because now you've created technology that has the same speeds, has the same capabilities, has minimal latency, in some cases even faster than a lot of broadband and DSL connectivities that customers are still using today. So I think those are the trends that we're starting to see. And really, there's a broader need than that now in, like Shawn mentioned, because of all the wireless and IoT devices that are connected not only to your home, but inside your business as well. You were telling me a while ago before we started the podcast about one of the largest airports in the country and the absolute necessity for them to provide with wireless is a small be inside their business. They can't afford to do massive wireline construction projects inside their building. And when they deploy a new HVAC system or a new large piece of equipment that requires connectivity, the only solution for them is really going to be that wireless technology. So there's more and more use cases for wireless. It makes it much easier, makes it cheaper, makes it much faster to deploy. And they're really part of the bigger trends that we're from a technology perspective. Now, where Bigleaf comes into play is we really allow you to harden those connections, to really rely on those connections to provide better voice quality, better cloud application capabilities, because we're reducing the latency. We're prioritizing that through our QoS systems. We're allowing you to dynamically bond two different wireless connections, so satellite or 5G or 4G or competitor A and competitor B, and bringing those together to create that hardened wireless connection. And that's really something that's a complete game changer, and where we'll start to see some very rapid expansion over the next couple of years as carriers look to monetize the networks that they've invested in over the past few years.
It's interesting because hearing both of you talk, it puts an interesting perspective on the next question I'm going to ask, which is, listen to everything that's available today that's in the marketplace, but there's still a lot of latent perceptions in the business world about how I can't rely on wireless. We've all heard the commercials on Can You Hear Me Now? Shawn, if you wouldn't mind taking this first, what would you say to the companies today that are hesitant on diving in and saying, yes, our network infrastructure should be a wireless first infrastructure? We're not giving up wire connections. Nobody's saying giving up wire connections, but what would you say to them that they had those latent perceptions about where the market is today?
And so it can be extremely hard to have those conversations because people aren't open to them. So usually the way I approach it is a very fact-based way, and just talk to the different parts of their business and say, if you're a service business, for instance, we're looking at end users. We want to have that seamless experience. And this is one way that we can do that. I think the backhoe cutting the line was one of the best examples. And this has literally happened to me. There's this shift on how people work, interact, what technology can give us. And so part of that, again, for the end user side, is applications that respond faster, processing happens closer to users. We're trying to bring that experience to them and reduce any possible friction. And one way we do this for a business or for an end user customer-focused business is to give them tools in the toolbox. And one of these tools is this wireless connection. It makes a seamless experience possible. We can go from wired, traditional to wireless. And I think that cognizant of that awareness, when you have services that adapt to user location, environment, individual need, you're really driving up the value of that business and that service that you're providing to customers. On the business leader side, and that's where we get hung up a lot, is the cost factor. But you need to consider this and say, yes, we understand very well. We've got our arms around that conversation on legacy networking gear. We understand that that's very well detailed out in your return on investment. But this is also an intangible thing. So we're talking about value to customer. We're talking about value to service. And so any technology that's assistive in that and that can improve that is actually going to be an improvement to the business. So it's not so much a cost-cutting factor so much as an expansion of the business factor. All boats float higher when there's a larger market and a larger ocean of invention. And so that's where we want to be. And I think from a unified vision perspective, we've gotten to the point where it's ubiquitous, where it's foundational, and it's not just an either-or conversation. It's getting all these things together to an assist as something larger than the sum of their parts. And I think that's where we should be today. And that's the conversation that I try to have both from a numbers, dollars and cents perspective, but also from an assistive perspective. A lot of these businesses are people businesses. And so we're trying to bring that value add to the customer. And that's one of the ways that we can do it.
If I asked you from a 180-degree different lens, if you were, and because you're talking to businesses all day long about their network infrastructure, and if you had to say, can we actually make a solid recommendation in today's environment with the Internet of Things? Like we had a gentleman came on the podcast. He goes, we're all already wireless. We all live on our devices. And as employees, we live on our devices. And as customers, we live on our devices. We are already living wirelessly first. So if you had to tell somebody that you were making a recommendation to, that why it was important that wireless was one of the primary means of how we're going to deliver, not only for them and their network infrastructure, but how they run their business, how they provide customer service for their customers, engage their employees, all the things that come from that. What would you say to them if they were in that naysayer camp?
One of the last clients that I had, it was a Fortune 50 company. They were looking to revamp their service delivery, and they were also looking to revamp their desktop support, basically. And so one of the things that I actually pitched to them was moving into this wireless space, because I thought it was one way that you could focus on the customer. You could give tablets or phones, for that matter, to the technicians if they have to go out remotely, if they have to service remote offices. And so it's an assistive technology for the technician. It's also a way where you can really improve service level by having these techs go out, being able to interact, being able to give people answers at the touch of a finger on their tablet, and be able to also set them up for their appointments, be able to redo their devices. So from a service delivery perspective, I think it's really great. I've seen a lot of these. It can be manufacturers. It can be companies that do a lot of drop shipping, anything like that. If you have someone that needs to go out in the field, it's really critical. On the other side of that, you have something like a large oil company, for instance. Because of the nature of the business, now they've really moved into this innovation space, and they're using wireless technology. They're using 5G, and they're doing it from a data sensor perspective. One, it's just crazy to have a platform 10 miles off in the ocean somewhere, and you're not going to use wireless technologies. It's insane to even think you wouldn't do that. But two, even on the operational side, these guys are using loose leaf binders to come up with solutions. Or I could just give you this tablet that has wireless capabilities and you can do it right here instead of leafing through 50 volumes of something that's been kept under a tarp in Lagos. It's funny, but it's true. I literally handed them a tablet and they showed me like these loose leaf binders that have been sitting there for the last 20 years. And that's what they've been using. So it seems foundational, but it's transformational to a lot of businesses. And I don't think coming from the inside out, and seeing what's on the news every day and even using your device every day, I don't think people really understand how much transformation there really is in that space, and how digital transformation using the 5G can really expand the abilities and the operations of a business.
Dave, I'd love to get your perspective because you're talking to customers all day long as well. And what do you say? How do you convince them of the viability of a wireless first network infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's almost like it sells itself at this point just because of the ubiquity across multiple locations. So if you think about a company who is in construction management, they might have 200 sites that they're working on. They need a single solution that can work across all of their locations. And in many of those locations, there isn't infrastructure yet. So they need to have a ubiquitous solution across all those different locations. There's other places. We have a big business with a company in Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico has disparate infrastructure, if you will, in some cases. And the wireless offering allows them to have that ubiquity across all their different locations. And the benefit of having a partner like Bigleaf in that scenario is I can see the output of those circuits in packet loss latency, jitter, whether or not there's an issue with a particular location specifically, or there's inside that location what the specific issue might be inside their network. So we can do trace testing, different things like that. There's a lot of tools in place right now to manage that network infrastructure, especially on the wireless side. And it's very accessible now to businesses of all sizes. And so that's another area that's changed and evolved with the new technology, and it's happening very quickly. So if you think about where we were, maybe even where we are right now, in some cases where your home internet network, you may experience some problems, but you really don't have good tools available to you to say, what exactly is going on? Is it something inside my house that's driving it? Is it somebody downloading a video game, or was it somebody on a video conference and they're impacting my experience? But with small business technology and partners like Bigleaf and others like us, you can quickly look at our dashboard and see exactly what's going on. And so that's helped to build confidence inside the industry by being able to demonstrate that, number one, the technology is working. Number two, that you have your eye on the ball and you can tell them exactly what's going on, what this is going on, and what they need to do to resolve their issues. The other piece is really that sort of hardening of the network that I mentioned before. So you can have multiple wireless technologies. You can have multiple wireless providers into a single location as well, which provides you, number one, very easy access to multiple solutions in a single location, but also just very simple deployment as well. You can do those deployments without having to do a big network build. You can do those deployments without having a technician come to your home. It's all very self-install capability. So it's just much easier, much more cost-effective than it ever has been before.
I'd love to ask you this because I had it explained to me what Bigleaf Networks does by one of your partners. And he said, Steve, I plug in Bigleaf and I watch the performance of the network transform. I unplug Bigleaf and I see it go back to the chaos. And he said, and I can just plug it in, plug it out. Just so we all understand here, what's the Bigleaf for Dummies explanation of what you do so that we can get an encapsulation of specifically what it is in about a minute, if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, sure. So the easiest way to explain what we do is network optimization. So if you think about a single circuit network optimization, the primary thing that we're able to do is provide bidirectional QoS. So what that means is we've got our own cloud infrastructure, and we can have the customer's location talk to, from their endpoint, talk to our cloud infrastructure, but we can control the traffic that goes in both those directions. And the reason that's important is if you're using business critical applications like home server IP, or critical cloud applications that are monitoring IoT devices and sensors, or if you're just using Outlook, I think most people are using the cloud version of the Outlook and Teams these days. And it can prioritize those business critical applications. And that's really important element of prioritizing. Those are hardening the network, are providing that level of confidence for small businesses. But where the really sort of the magic sauce is when we add additional circuits. So you can add up to 4 circuits to our network. So think about it. You might have Verizon, you may want a backup, you may want a satellite backup, you may want another wireline as your backup because you have business critical information that's bypassing that, or you're taking credit card transactions as a key component of your business. you never want that internet to go down. So we have a technology that allows you to dynamically load balance between those different circuits. And dynamically is a key and critical piece there. You're not assigning load to a certain circuit. You can customize those things, but you don't have to. Basically taking the best path up on the upload and the best path down on the download. And that allows, again, for that sort of seamless internet experience on calls like this that we're having right now, or when you're using those business critical applications. And also, more importantly, if one of those circuits goes down, you automatically fail over to the secondary circuit. And so I say that sort of tongue in cheek. You're not exactly failing over in the traditional sense like you would with other solutions. So in those solutions, that circuit is going down. There's something that said, hey, I think that circuit went down. And then it turns on the other circuit. And they have a problem with that older technology or that type of technology, because if you have something that relies on IP technology like POS systems and IoT devices, all of those devices shut down or let you reboot and log on to the new network. And that could take up to 20 minutes in a lot of places. So your network will back up in 2 minutes or 30 seconds. But all those devices and applications have to reboot, reconnect, and reconnection. With Bigleaf, it works differently. You're connected directly to our box. And if one of those connections goes down, your network never even knows about it. Our second circuit is already live. It's already working even as a backup. And it switches, the traffic just switches over to that secondary connection. So the benefit of that is if you do have those critical applications, point of sale, IoT devices, voice over IP technology, none of that stuff is impacted in any way. So if that were to happen right now on this phone call, none of us would even realize that anything had occurred. If it happened on some of those older technologies, I'll be switch over, you'd see when my screen was black, I'd have to reconnect and say, oh, sorry, so there's some disruption from that standpoint, which maybe on a voice call, a little annoying, not a big deal. But if you're trying to run business critical applications or point of sale, that becomes a problem.
Here's what I want to do. I want to talk about that environment. But then, Shawn, you brought up edge computing, and it seems like so much is going out more and more to the edge, whether you're on that oil platform, right, out in the middle of the ocean, or you're a restaurant chain and all your individual locations, they now have digitally transformed kitchens. Everything from knowing their supply that they have to have and on hand to how are they promising the right delivery time to people that are ordering on the app. Like, it's going so far out. But one thing we don't have at the edge is we don't have an IT department out at the edge. We don't have a group of people that are there running it. How important is the kind of system that Dave is talking about, a plug and play system like this that handles the connections, the failovers, a number of different ISPs coming together? What does that mean for computing at the edge, doing business at the edge?
So I would say in general, in this encapsulating statement, it's decentralization of networking or decentralization of central networking. 5G is accelerating the adoption of edge computing. It's allowing you another tool in your toolbox to be able to bridge that gap. Dave just mentioned quite a lot of things, actually, but one of the things that I picked up on was dedicating that network resources to critical applications, being able to apply policies in such a way that you don't even notice the gap. I think from an assistive technology, that's particularly important. From a software development or software-defined networking, like as a bridging LAN, whether that's a small restaurant or whether that's a global provider like Walmart, it's having that flexibility of options beyond fixed connection, the dynamic routing. I did a lot of work with banks and financials, and of course, there's always MPLS circuits. But now we've gotten beyond that where we can bridge that. And so it's almost the technology underlying it's still important, but it's become more of a black box for a lot of companies, which I think is really important in terms of high performance connectivity, both for the business and also for remote workers, mobile workforce. It could be pop-up locations or temporary sites, vehicle and transportation fleets. It could be any of these things that are really empowered by this. So it's not just that 5G is an interesting technology, it's also that it empowers the business to be able to operate efficiently in the modern world. And that could be IoT and sensor integration at scale. That could be a private 5G for mission critical applications, real-time analytics, decision-making. Like, again, that was more in my financials background, but look at instant analysis of operational data. It's all enabled by that assistive 5G technology. So I think that for me, that's the intersection of where the business really gets the value from the technology.
Here's the thing, that the obvious network working on the edge and flawlessly. When I talk to IT people inside of organizations, they don't want complexity. They want simplicity. Their teams are shrinking, not growing. They don't know how to keep up with technology. They want a solution they can plug and play. They don't want to have to go and deploy somebody to a remote location to fix the network. In that kind of an environment, it seems like the Bigleaf Network's solution really is adaptive to where we're going today, where more and more network computing is happening at the edge, but we don't have the manpower, we don't have the desire to really take care of it like the way that we used to have to. Tell us a little bit about just maybe some stories of some of the clients that you've worked with and how that's come to life in terms of their own manpower and infrastructure of how they have to support the network before and after a big lease.
Yeah. All right. That's a great question. I wouldn't say complicated question, but it's certainly a question that we hear on a regular basis, I would say. So it primarily relates to our large multi-distributed customers. And so what we're starting to kind of see right now is as those multi-distributed customers expand, like we said, the resources start to get smaller. And so where they might have a centralized IT staff or even a regionally based IT staff, they don't necessarily have a nationwide or a broader distributed IT staff. And so what the scenario in which they were in previously, and in some cases, a lot of customers are still in this scenario. What happens is if there's an internet outage or a problem, they have to deploy a technician, in a lot of cases, very expensive resource that in some cases is a third-party resource that just happens to maybe be in the vicinity or region available to that customer. And they come out and they troubleshoot. They try to figure out what's going on. In some cases, I've seen these things happen where they can start at 8 a.m. and they're not out of there until 8 p.m. And a lot of that is because they're working directly with an ISP and they're trying to figure out what's going on and they're troubleshooting. And all this time, the customer at that location is out. They're unable to leverage internet service. That's maybe a little bit more of a dramatic scenario. It happens on a pretty frequent basis in certain regions. Now, a less dramatic scenario would be I've got 100 locations and 4 of them have internet problems and I don't have an IT person on staff. Because somebody needs to go out and figure out what's going on or pick up the phone and help somebody. And it takes time either way for those kind of locations to get back up online and figure out what's going on. In some cases, they self-heal and the internet went down because there was a storm and it went back up and great. But then what you start to run into, like I said before, is now the POS system went down, now the IoT system went down. In certain environments, customers aren't allowed to take payments if like video cameras and things like that are not operational. So there's actually compliance issues that start to come up in those scenarios. So even if you pop back on in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour later, whatever the scenario is, you're still out for a period of time until all the systems are up and running and operational. So that's the life that some customers were living in the past, and maybe some of them are still content living in today as pain point. Now, when you start to deploy Bigleaf, what's great about it is if you can have one central network person at one central location, look at the circuits across all those different locations and troubleshoot the circuits like the locations. So I've got 100 locations. These 4 locations are down. Each of these airports have dual connections. And it looks like WAN A is down. It's flipped over now to WAN B, and the site is back up and running. And there's no downtime. There's no issues, no concerns. That really all happened all seamlessly and at the same time. The only reason I would know about it is because I got a notification and I looked at the notification and said, hey, we checked this out. Make sure everything's cool. You mean why do some troubleshooting to say it looks like WAN A is down, that's Verizon or that's Lumen or that's AT&T or is that some other provider? And I may want to just see if there's an issue that's going on or the reason, but I don't need to worry about that location because that location got a secondary connection automatically failed over. He's up and running. He probably doesn't even know that he's got an internet outage, but I can go work on whatever the situation is with that particular provider in the back end without having to worry about what's happening with the customer location. So that's a new world. That's the sort of the technique, the technology that we provide, which is pretty cool. And it's very rewarding as well. We'll kind of realize the capabilities that we're providing on these small businesses and these multi-location distributed franchises to allow them to kind of stay up and running and really sort of avoid all those headaches and cost and other things that they have to deal with in the past.
I love that. A customer could lose the connection with the Verizon or something. It automatically fails over to a connection that's working perfectly. Maybe Verizon comes back up or Xfinity comes back up or whatever it is, and they never even knew there was a problem. So I have to ask this question because in every industry, the impact of AI, we're all thinking about. And so, Shawn, I want to ask you, there's conversations about limited capabilities of right now what AI is doing in the network space, infrastructure space, all the way to completely autonomous networks where we don't really need us as humans too much anymore. What's your point of view? Just the world of AI, where we're going, and how it applies to the network infrastructure industry.
There's a little bit to unpack there, but so I think if we look at purely on the security side, I think that there's a lot of value in AI being used in terms of both machine learning, malware signatures and that kind of thing, being able to scrape logs and be able to transmit that data back to us. In terms of operational data, and also that'd be sensor data, the instant analysis of operational data, being able to cycle that back and actually flag what is a potential issue versus what may just be informational, being able to weed out that, because to use my oil platform example, it's 2 million points of contact for sensors. How does the human mind look at 2 million data points and come up to something conclusive? So that's where that AI technology is really valuable. But I would also say from a cautious optimism perspective, you also want that human element in there, guiding that, designing that infrastructure and making sure that you're aligning it both to what it should be doing and then what the business needs going forward, which sometimes are competing priorities, but should always be part of a design perspective. So I think that's where the value is. There's some convergence with IT in terms of common security frameworks across all these domains, unified management of these diverse connected systems, integration of industrial systems with business applications, and probably consistent governance of all these different network types, whether it's wired or wireless. And so from a future perspective, I believe it can basically boost baseline efficiency of infrastructure and operations teams. I think that's the value add with low code, no code functionality, no touch functionality. This sort of theory of autonomous systems and self-healing systems, I think it helps to democratize network management and make it somewhat more permeable to smaller players as well. Combined with 5G, I think you can use it to make more responsive networks and responsive necessarily to the change of business. Because when you have a monolith or a Fortune 50 company, it's turning a battleship in a bathtub, right? It's going to be a slow, gradual process. If you're in a small or mid-sized business, there's going to be a lot more responsive. You're going to want to be able to have a system that can, not dynamically necessarily, but can much more rapidly respond to this. I think that's the value out there as well. From a sustainability priority, I think the IT teams are still going to be there, but they're going to use that real-time telemetry, dashboards, and other tools to achieve those goals.
The human in the loop, I think, is something that across technologies with AI that's not going to go away. Because you're talking about the dashboard, Dave, you guys have not only built a software component, an entire dashboard on this, and you use AI, you use machine learning, you use automation today. You actually have a platform that is really agnostic to other SaaS products and tools and AI tools that are going to be coming out that can be on top of this. So if you could explain the foundation, maybe even for AI and what's coming that's already built into the Bigleaf technology, I'd love to hear from that.
Yeah, I kind of love to connect the dots on both sides of it. So the technology that we've got in place today and then how that sort of helps to enable AI technology that sits outside of the Bigleaf network. So inside of Bigleaf, we're using, for lack of a better term, we use packet inspection to understand the data that's coming into our network. And so With that information, we can understand specifically what types of information's coming in. That's how we determine whether you're VoIP traffic or whether you're a cloud application, whether you're Outlook, whether you're Zoom, whether you're Teams or somebody else. And we can leverage that information to prioritize that traffic. And we leverage machine learning to identify what those things are, look for new signatures so that we can understand changing dynamics inside your network. If you have 20 different people on your network and they're using different types of applications, we look at all those different things and we're able to dynamically prioritize that traffic based on the type of information that's coming in. So that's one aspect of how we dynamically manage the network traffic. And so I mentioned that before, and that's how we do a couple of different things. Number one, we're managing the traffic, type of traffic that comes in through the Bigleaf flow. So what's coming in, what's going out. And then the other element of AI and automation that we leverage is where that traffic is routed. And so that is the upload length, multiple circuits. We also need to understand the capabilities of each of those circuits. And we're testing those circuits 10 times per second to say, this is the best upload length, this is the best download. And we are taking that traffic based on the priority that we have, and we're pushing the traffic and taking the traffic up the best path. And not all that stuff happens together simultaneously, leveraging AI and machine learning. The next step to that would be to identify bad stuff that's coming in. That's the evolution of what we're looking at as well. By inspecting the traffic at a more granular level, we can start to look for patterns. And those patterns will not only help us to direct the traffic in the right way, but also to drop certain types of traffic. So duplicative traffic that's coming in, that's chewing up bandwidth, or that's slowing down, that's causing latency or packet loss jitter or other things that might be happening, or that may become a security risk. So those are kinds of things that happen inside of our technology. And so where that starts to become important to customers that are leveraging AI software, AI technology at their network edge, like IoT devices, this is where it gets super cool. Those guys have this super cutting edge, really cool stuff that's starting to happen. So there's video cameras out there right now that are monitoring backdoor a restaurant or backdoor a retail chain, and they can tell what kind of vehicle is approaching. Is it a delivery truck? Is it a bad guy? Is it a good guy? Is it a dog? Is it a cat? Is it a person? All these different things. They can actually tell you, hey, the UPS driver's here. What was that? There's nobody looking at the camera. The camera just told the UPS guy is here. That's pretty neat stuff. So those are the types of things that they're able to do. And they really need to have that. Like I said, they need to have a ubiquitous network that never goes down. And that's prioritizing that business critical AI application at the end or at the edge. And that's exactly what we'll do. So we can take the technology or the traffic, we'd say, hey, this looks like it's a priority business application, and we're going to run it over our best links, and that's going to take priority over everything else. And that's exactly the way our technology takes that endpoint technology and pushes it over our network. So it's pretty neat how the two are connected. So we're taking, that's an example of business critical information. So I'm not even at my office. My business app is closed. A truck is approaching, and it's not one of my trucks because I've read the license plate. It doesn't belong to me. That looks like a bad guy. Automatically calls the police or alert somebody or something. Action. So it's pretty neat.
So I wish we had an entire day to talk because I know, Shawn, you're a professor. Like, there's so much here, but I'm going to ask you guys one last question and like a 30 to 45 second answer. And here's the question. Are you ready? We've talked about so much here. If there was one takeaway about this move to and the trend to wireless network infrastructure and where we are today, what's the one thing that you want the audience to take away from our conversation today? And Dave, I'll let you take the first crack at it if you don't mind.
All right. The one thing, well, look, I would say the one thing, and this might be a late statement here, but I would say it is, don't be afraid of wireless technology as a primary connector for your business. So it's becoming more and more ubiquitous. Like I said before, it's taking over wireline connectivity. It's taken over what we considered the best in breed, which was really fiber to the home or fiber to your business office location. 5G is really going to be the thing that takes over. And it works better than it ever has before. Again, it's becoming more of a hardened technology, whereas before we might be worried about the weather. We might be worried about what room it's in. We might be worried about where it's located and that kind of a thing. Those problems are starting to go away because the new technology, the hardware has changed. The software that surrounds it, as I mentioned several times on the call, has changed significantly to really harden that connection for 5G. And the technology is really only going to get better from here. So as you think about 5G and people go, it only gets up to maybe 400 megabytes per second in my location or 200 megabytes per second in my location. That is just where we are today. And a year from now, 18 months from now, the technology is rapidly changing and those speeds will change dramatically. But what other people don't realize is you really don't need a lot of bandwidth. You don't need a lot of speed. Most people are using a quarter of what they pay for. It might be by rate gig, and they really are only using 100 megabytes per second. And that is a real statistic. That's a real comparison of real life businesses that we look at on a day-to-day basis as we understand usage from our customers. So that's one of the things our technology also provides is we can tell you how much you're actually using, how much speed you really need. So you don't need to overpay for your circuits. And most people really are overpaying sometimes for speed when the technology is really what they need instead.
It's almost like an ego thing. We check on fast.com or something like, oh, look at this. But even with cloud network computing, the applications in the cloud, we don't really need more than about 100 megabyte per second.
Those electric cars that go from 0 to 60 in 3.2 seconds. Who's doing that?
Shawn, what would you say is the final takeaway here that you'd like to have everybody know?
Okay. So I started way back with the token ring. And so I really appreciate the whole gamut and how 5G is revolutionary compared to that old style technology. But I'd say it's a fundamental shift from connectivity technology as a fixed resource to a service layer. So we're not talking about fixed hardwired things anymore. It's a service layer that you're laying on top of this to enable business. So what does that mean? That means there's no physical location necessarily. It doesn't dictate the network capability. The network resources can be deployed, reconfigured, like we talked about through the conversation. Infrastructure becomes more adaptable. It's less static. And the network extends seamlessly across those traditional boundaries. It's no longer a barrier anymore because of this kind of technology that we have now.
Guys, what I would like to say is thank you, because the mission of this podcast is to bring in different perspectives from all over the industry. And you guys are so embedded in the industry, working with so many different businesses, that this kind of conversation, I call the rising tide that lifts all boats. If we can all be a little bit smarter and a little bit better as a result, then that's a good thing. So thank you both for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it very much.